My name is David, and my wife is Emily. We live in a quaint suburban neighborhood, a place where the lawns are always trimmed and the picket fences gleam in the afternoon sun. Our home is a modest two-story house, painted a soft blue with white shutters, nestled at the end of a cul-de-sac. It's the kind of place where everyone knows each other, where summer barbecues and holiday decorations are part of the community spirit. Emily and I have been married for 10 years. We don't have any children, a decision we made mutually early in our relationship. Emily works as a marketing manager at a mid-sized firm, while I run a small but successful IT consulting business from home. Our life, from the outside, appears idyllic. We have a comfortable lifestyle, a network of friends, and a relationship that, until recently, I thought was solid. We've always been the couple that our friends look up to. Emily, with her outgoing personality and infectious laughter, is the life of any party. I'm the more reserved one, preferring quiet evenings with a book or a movie. Despite our differences, we complemented each other well, or so I believed. Our home is a reflection of our life together. The living room is filled with photos from our travels: Italy, Japan, New Zealand, each picture a testament to the adventures we've shared. Emily loves gardening, and our backyard is her sanctuary, a riot of colors with flowers in bloom almost year-round. It's a place where we used to spend quiet evenings, sipping wine and talking about our dreams. Lately, though, I've sensed a shift. Small things, barely noticeable at first, but they've been adding up. Emily's been working late more often, her laughter a bit too forced, her smiles not reaching her eyes. I've tried to dismiss these thoughts, attributing them to the stress of her demanding job. But as days turned into weeks, my suspicions grew, and the tranquility of our home began to feel like a facade. This is the story of how I discovered the betrayal that shattered my world, and the journey I took to confront, avenge, and eventually find a new path forward. It started with the little things. Emily, who used to be an open book, began closing herself off. She spent more time on her phone, her screen always tilted away from me. I noticed her laughter sounded different, almost guarded. Our once lively conversations dwindled to polite exchanges. She was often distracted, her mind clearly elsewhere. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. Maybe it was just stress from her job. Marketing could be a high-pressure field, and Emily was dedicated to her work. But as weeks turned into months, I couldn't ignore the growing chasm between us. She started going out more often, claiming she was meeting friends or attending work functions. One evening, she came home late, smelling faintly of a cologne that wasn't mine. I asked her about it, trying to keep my tone casual. She laughed it off, saying she had hugged a colleague goodbye. The explanation seemed plausible, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Emily's wardrobe also began to change. She started wearing sexier, more provocative clothes, items I hadn't seen before. When I complimented her, she brushed it off, her eyes flickering with an emotion I couldn't quite place. She used to share everything with me, from her shopping sprees to her bad days at work. Now, there were gaps in her stories, details left out or glossed over. Our sex life, once vibrant and passionate, became virtually non-existent. Emily was always too tired or not in the mood. On the rare occasions when we did make love, it felt mechanical, devoid of the intimacy we once shared. Her mind seemed elsewhere, and I couldn't shake the feeling that she was merely going through the motions. One weekend, Emily told me she was going on a business trip. It was unusual, as she rarely traveled for work. Her explanation was vague, and when I pressed for details, she snapped at me, accusing me of being overbearing. This was unlike her. Emily was always the calm one in our relationship. I apologized, not wanting to escalate the situation, but the unease lingered. While she was away, I found myself obsessing over the signs. I replayed every odd behavior, every unexplained absence, every cold response. My mind was a whirlpool of suspicion and denial. I wanted to trust her, to believe that we were just going through a rough patch. But the inconsistencies were piling up, and the nagging doubt in my mind was becoming impossible to ignore. One day, while tidying up, I found a receipt from a high-end restaurant in her purse. The date coincided with one of her supposed work dinners. We rarely went out to such places, preferring cozy, low-key spots. I didn't recognize the name on the credit card slip that accompanied it. The name was Jonathan. My heart sank. Who was Jonathan? Why hadn't she mentioned him? I decided it was time to find out. I started paying closer attention, noting down her whereabouts, her excuses, her behavior. I knew I needed more concrete evidence before confronting her, but each discovery felt like a dagger to the heart. One evening, I installed a GPS tracker in her car. It was a desperate move, one that made me feel sick to my stomach. But I needed to know. I had to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. My suspicions were tearing me apart, and I couldn't live in the shadow of doubt any longer. The stage was set for a discovery that would change everything. It was a rainy Tuesday when the tracker pinged her location at a restaurant across town. She had told me she was working late at the office, finalizing a big project. My heart raced as I drove, the windshield wipers beating a frantic rhythm in time with my pulse. When I arrived, I parked a block away and walked, my steps heavy with dread. I found a spot near the window where I could see inside the restaurant without being noticed. And there she was, sitting at a corner table, laughing and touching the hand of a man I didn't recognize. Jonathan, I presumed. They were engrossed in conversation, oblivious to the world around them. I watched as he leaned in, brushing a strand of hair from her face before planting a kiss on her lips. My stomach churned, a mix of anger and heartbreak surging through me. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and started recording. I needed proof, something undeniable. The video captured their intimate exchange, the way she looked at him with the same affection she once reserved for me. It was as if the ground beneath me was crumbling, the life I knew falling away piece by piece. I couldn't stand it any longer. Rage boiled within me, overpowering the sadness and betrayal. I stormed into the restaurant, my vision narrowed to their table. Emily's eyes widened in shock as she saw me approach. Jonathan turned to see what had startled her, but before he could react, I reached their table and overturned it, sending plates and glasses crashing to the floor. "What the hell is this, Emily?" I shouted, my voice shaking with fury. "Who the fuck is he?" Jonathan stood up, trying to calm me down. "Listen, man, let's talk about this." I didn't give him a chance to finish. My fist connected with his jaw, sending him stumbling backward. Emily screamed, but I barely heard her. All I could see was red, my anger driving me to hit him again and again. The restaurant patrons gasped and yelled for help, but I was beyond caring. Jonathan fought back, landing a punch on my cheek, but his resistance only fueled my rage. I tackled him to the ground, my fists pummeling his face until he stopped moving. It was only when I felt strong hands pulling me away that I realized the staff had intervened, dragging me off him. Emily was crying, her face a mask of horror and disbelief. "David, stop! Please stop!" I wrenched myself free from the staff's grip, breathing heavily, my knuckles bloodied. "How long, Emily? How long have you been fucking him behind my back?" Her sobs were the only answer I needed. She couldn't even look me in the eye. The restaurant manager threatened to call the police, and I knew I needed to leave before things got worse. I backed away, glaring at both of them. "This isn't over," I spat, my voice cold and deadly. "You'll hear from my lawyer." With that, I turned and walked out, the rain hitting my face like icy needles. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions, anger, betrayal, sadness. But above all, a burning desire for revenge. Emily had shattered our life, and I was determined to make her and her lover pay. I spent the night in a hotel, my mind racing as I replayed the events at the restaurant. The confrontation had been intense, but it was far from over. I knew I couldn't avoid facing Emily, and the thought of her waiting at home filled me with a mixture of dread and anger. When I returned home the next morning, the house felt eerily silent. Emily was in the kitchen, her face pale and drawn. She looked up as I entered, her eyes red from crying. "David, we need to talk," she said, her voice trembling. "Talk?" I scoffed. "You mean you need to lie some more?" She flinched at my words but didn't back down. "I know what I did was wrong, but you need to hear my side." "Your side? You mean the part where you betrayed me and our marriage for some cheap thrill?" My voice rose, echoing through the empty house. Tears welled up in her eyes, but I felt no sympathy. "It wasn't like that," she insisted. "I never meant for it to go this far. Jonathan was just someone who listened, who made me feel alive again." "Alive?" I shouted, the rage bubbling up again. "You destroyed our life for what? Some fleeting excitement? What about the vows we took, Emily? What about us? She shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. I felt so alone, David. You were always so busy with work. I needed someone who was there for me, who paid attention. That's bullshit, and you know it. I slammed my fist on the counter. I've always been here for you. I've worked my ass off to provide for us, to make sure you had everything you needed. And this is how you repay me? Emily's face twisted in anguish. I'm sorry, David. I know I hurt you, but it wasn't just about the sex. It was about feeling wanted, feeling like I mattered. You mattered to me, I said, my voice breaking. You always mattered to me. But now, I don't know if I can ever trust you again. She reached out to touch my arm, but I pulled away. The hurt was too deep. The betrayal too raw. Please, David. Let's go to counseling. Let's try to fix this. I don't want to lose you. I laughed bitterly. Fix this? How do you fix something that's been shattered into a million pieces? You made your choice, Emily. And now you have to live with it. Her tears flowed freely now, but I felt numb. I couldn't find it in me to comfort her, to offer any solace. The woman I had loved, the woman I had trusted with my heart, had torn it apart. Is that your justification? I asked, my voice cold. Loneliness? Needing attention? You could have talked to me, Emily. You could have told me how you felt. But instead, you chose to betray me. And now we're done. Please don't say that, she whispered, her voice cracking. I love you, David. I've always loved you. I shook my head, the words hollow and meaningless. Love? You don't even know what that means anymore. If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this. She collapsed onto the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. I stood there, watching her, feeling nothing but a hollow emptiness. I had loved her once, but that love had been tainted by her deceit. I'm filing for divorce, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. And I'm going to make sure Jonathan pays for what he did. Emily looked up, her eyes wide with fear. David, please, don't do this. We can work through this. We can… No, I interrupted, my voice firm. There's no going back. You made your bed, now lie in it. With that, I turned and walked out, leaving her to her tears. The confrontation had been brutal, but it was necessary. Emily had shown her true colors, and I couldn't ignore the betrayal any longer. I had to protect myself, to rebuild my life without her, and I was determined to make sure she felt the full weight of her actions. The days following our confrontation were a blur of anger and plotting. I couldn't just let this go. Emily and Jonathan needed to understand the depth of their betrayal, and I was going to make sure they did. I started by gathering all the evidence I had. The video from the restaurant, the GPS logs, the receipts, and the incriminating messages on her phone. I compiled everything into a folder, something I could present to my lawyer to strengthen my case. But I needed more. I wanted them to feel the same humiliation and pain they had inflicted on me. That's when I came up with a plan. First, I called Emily's workplace. I knew her boss well enough to know he wouldn't tolerate such behavior from one of his employees. I sent him an anonymous email with all the evidence I had gathered, detailing the affair and how it was conducted during work hours. I knew this would jeopardize her job. But at that moment, I didn't care. She needed to face the consequences. Next, I focused on Jonathan. I did some digging and found out where he worked. It wasn't hard to discover his employer's contact details. I sent a similar email, ensuring his superiors were aware of his extracurricular activities. The thought of both of them facing disciplinary actions, possibly losing their jobs, was a small but satisfying part of my plan. But I wasn't done. I wanted Jonathan to feel the same physical pain I'd felt emotionally. I found out where he lived and waited outside his apartment one evening. As he approached, I confronted him. "Remember me?" I asked, my voice low and menacing. Jonathan's eyes widened in recognition and fear. "Look, man, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." "Too late for apologies," I snarled. Without another word, I lunged at him, landing a punch squarely on his jaw. He stumbled back, trying to defend himself, but my rage made me unstoppable. I pounded him, each blow fueled by the betrayal and hurt that had consumed me. When I finally stopped, Jonathan was on the ground, bloodied and bruised. I leaned down, my face inches from his. "If you ever come near my wife again, I will destroy you," I hissed. "Consider this a warning." I walked away, leaving him lying there. The adrenaline coursed through me, a temporary high from the act of vengeance, but it didn't bring the satisfaction I had hoped for. The pain was still there, gnawing at me, a constant reminder of what I had lost. Back at home, I found Emily packing her things. She looked up as I entered, her face a mixture of fear and resignation. "I've been suspended from work," she said quietly. "They're conducting an investigation." "Good," I replied coldly. "You deserve it." She nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. "I'm leaving, David. I'll go stay with my sister for a while." "Do whatever you want," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "Just know that I'm filing for divorce, and I will make sure you get nothing." She broke down, sobbing as she gathered her belongings. I watched her go, feeling a strange sense of relief. The woman who had betrayed me was leaving my life, and I could finally begin to rebuild. But the sense of satisfaction was fleeting. As the days passed, the reality of my actions settled in. I had sought revenge, but it hadn't healed the wounds. I was still broken, still grappling with the loss of trust and love. I visited my lawyer, handing over all the evidence I had collected. "I want the divorce finalized as soon as possible," I said, my voice firm. "We'll get it done," he assured me. "But remember, David, revenge might feel good in the moment, but it doesn't fix the underlying hurt." I nodded, understanding his words but feeling the emptiness inside. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with legal battles and emotional turmoil. But I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't let the betrayal define me. I had to find a way to move forward, to rebuild my life from the ashes of what had been destroyed. The days turned into weeks, and slowly I began to find a semblance of normalcy. I focused on my work, pouring my energy into my business. Friends and family offered support, their presence a balm to my wounded heart. I started seeing a therapist, someone who could help me navigate the complex emotions and find a path to healing. Revenge had been sweet, but it was time to look ahead, to rebuild and find a new sense of peace. The journey wouldn't be easy, but I was determined to reclaim my life and find happiness once more. The day of the trial arrived with a mix of apprehension and determination. I dressed carefully, choosing a suit that made me feel both confident and composed. My lawyer, Mr. Jenkins, had prepped me extensively, ensuring I knew what to expect and how to handle the proceedings. Still, the weight of what was to come pressed heavily on my shoulders. As I entered the courthouse, I saw Emily sitting with her lawyer. She looked worn, her usual confidence replaced by a palpable anxiety. Our eyes met briefly and I felt a pang of sadness. Despite everything, it was hard to see someone I had loved so deeply in such a state. The trial began with opening statements, both sides presenting their case. My lawyer laid out the evidence of Emily's infidelity and how it had impacted our marriage. He highlighted the financial support I had provided and the betrayal that had shattered the foundation of our relationship. Emily's lawyer attempted to paint a different picture, emphasizing her loneliness and the emotional neglect she claimed to have suffered. It was painful to listen to, but I reminded myself that this was part of the process. The truth, as messy as it was, needed to be laid bare. Witnesses were called, including colleagues from Emily's workplace who corroborated the evidence of her affair. They spoke of the changes in her behavior, the secretive meetings, and the time she spent with Jonathan. Each testimony was another nail in the coffin of our marriage, a confirmation of what I already knew. When it was my turn to testify, I took a deep breath and approached the stand. I recounted the events that had led to the discovery of the affair, the confrontation, and the impact it had on me. I spoke of the sleepless nights, the endless questioning of myself, and the emotional toll it had taken. My voice wavered at times, but I pressed on, determined to convey the depth of my pain. Emily took the stand next. Her testimony was a mixture of regret and justification. She admitted to the affair, but insisted it was a result of feeling neglected and unloved. She spoke of her loneliness, how she had sought solace in Jonathan's company, and how she never intended for things to go so far. Her words were filled with tears, but they felt like hollow excuses to me. The cross-examination was intense. My lawyer didn't hold back, questioning her about the messages, the meetings, and the lies she had told. Emily struggled to maintain her composure, her defenses crumbling under the weight of the evidence. It was painful to watch, but necessary. The truth needed to be exposed, no matter how brutal. After several days of testimony, the trial drew to a close. The judge reviewed the evidence, taking into account the testimonies and the impact on both parties. Finally, the moment came for the ruling. After careful consideration of the evidence presented, it is clear that the marriage has been irrevocably damaged by the actions of the respondent, the judge began. The evidence of infidelity is substantial and has clearly contributed to the breakdown of this marriage. I held my breath as the judge continued. In light of this, the court grants the petitioner, David, a divorce on the grounds of adultery. Additionally, given the circumstances, the petitioner is awarded a larger share of the marital assets and alimony. A wave of relief washed over me. The judge's ruling was a vindication, a recognition of the betrayal I had suffered. Emily's face was a mask of shock and devastation, but there was nothing more to be said. The decision was final. As we left the courtroom, my lawyer patted me on the back. "You did well, David. It's over now. You can start to move on." I nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and exhaustion. The trial had been grueling, but it was a necessary step towards closure. I had faced the truth, confronted the betrayal, and emerged on the other side. The legal battles were behind me, but the emotional journey was far from over. There was still healing to be done, still a path to navigate towards a new life. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of hope. The chapter with Emily was closed, and a new one was waiting to be written. The weeks following the trial felt like stepping into a new world. The weight of the legal battle had lifted, leaving a strange mix of freedom and uncertainty. I was finally free from the toxic relationship that had dominated my life for so long, but the path ahead was uncharted territory. I threw myself into my work, finding solace in the structure and predictability it provided. My IT consulting business thrived, partly due to my renewed focus and partly because it served as a distraction from the lingering pain. My colleagues and clients became my support network, their encouragement and understanding helping me stay grounded. Therapy sessions continued, guiding me through the emotional labyrinth left by the divorce. Dr. Patel, my therapist, was a steady presence, helping me unpack the complex feelings of betrayal, anger, and loss. Each session was a step towards healing, a process that required patience and self-compassion. One evening, while organizing my home office, I stumbled upon an old photo album. Flipping through the pages, I saw pictures of Emily and me from happier times. Our wedding day, vacations, birthdays, moments that now felt like they belonged to someone else's life. I closed the album and put it away, deciding that it was time to create new memories, ones that weren't tainted by betrayal. I began to reconnect with old friends, people I had lost touch with during my marriage. I accepted invitations to dinners, joined a local book club, and even started taking yoga classes. These activities brought a sense of community and belonging that I had missed. I was slowly rebuilding my social circle, finding joy in the simple act of connecting with others. One of the most unexpected sources of support came from my neighbor, Laura. She had lived next door for years, but we had never been more than acquaintances. After the trial, she reached out, offering a sympathetic ear and a homemade lasagna. We began to spend more time together, our conversations flowing easily. She had gone through a divorce herself and understood the challenges I faced. Laura's presence became a comforting constant. We spent evenings discussing everything from work to books to life's absurdities. One night, as we sat on my porch watching the sunset, she turned to me and said, "David, you're stronger than you realize. You've been through hell, but you're still here. That's something to be proud of." Her words struck a chord. I had been so focused on the pain and the loss that I hadn't acknowledged my own resilience. I had survived the betrayal, the confrontation, and the trial. I was still standing, still moving forward. As months passed, I found myself drawn to Laura in ways that went beyond friendship. She was kind, funny, and incredibly supportive. One evening, after a particularly long day, I invited her over for dinner. We cooked together, laughing and sharing stories. As we sat down to eat, the atmosphere shifted, a tension building that was both exciting and terrifying. "Laura," I began, my heart pounding, "I know this might sound crazy, but I've developed feelings for you. I don't want to rush into anything. but I felt like I needed to be honest. She looked at me, her eyes warm and understanding. David, I've felt the same way. I've been hesitant because I know how much you've been through. But I think we owe it to ourselves to explore this, to see where it goes. We decided to take things slowly, respecting the wounds that still needed to heal. Our relationship blossomed naturally, built on a foundation of mutual respect and understanding. Laura was a breath of fresh air, a reminder that love could be gentle and nurturing. The first time we kissed, it felt like the final piece of my shattered heart was falling back into place. It wasn't a grand, sweeping gesture, but a quiet, tender moment that spoke volumes. We were two people who had known pain, but were willing to risk opening up again. As our relationship grew, so did my sense of self. I realized that the betrayal I had endured didn't define me. It was a chapter in my life, but it wasn't the whole story. I had the power to write new chapters, to create a future that was filled with hope and possibility. One sunny afternoon, Laura and I decided to take a trip to a nearby lake. We packed a picnic and spent the day hiking, swimming, and simply enjoying each other's company. As we sat on the shore, watching the ripples on the water, I felt a profound sense of peace. "Thank you," I said, turning to her. "For everything. For being here. For being you." She smiled, taking my hand. "Thank you for letting me in. For trusting me with your heart." In that moment, I knew I had found something truly special. It wasn't just about finding love again. It was about finding myself, about realizing that I was capable of moving forward and building a new life. The journey had been long and arduous, filled with pain and uncertainty. But as I sat there with Laura, I understood that every step had led me to this point. I had learned to value myself, to recognize my worth, and to open my heart to new possibilities. Life after betrayal was not only possible but also beautiful. It was a testament to resilience, to the power of healing, and to the promise of new beginnings. And as I looked at the horizon, I knew that the best was yet to come.